The massive station hung in the darkness of space like a jewel made of metal and glass. Zenith Station was the pride of the Galactic Council, a place where 37 different species came together to talk, trade, and keep the peace. For 2,000 years, the Council had maintained order across hundreds of star systems. Wars were things of the ancient past, remembered only in history files that nobody bothered to read anymore. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the viewport of the human ship Odyssey, watching the station grow larger as they approached. He was a tall man with short dark hair going gray at the temples, wearing the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. This was humanity's first official visit to the Council, and Jake felt the weight of that responsibility on his shoulders. "We're being hailed by station control," said Lieutenant Amy Chen from her position at the communications console. She was younger than Jake, sharp-eyed and efficient, serving as the ship's tactical officer. "They're sending docking instructions." "Acknowledged," Jake replied. "Take us in slowly. Let's make a good first impression." Dr. Peter Grant joined Jake at the viewport, his weathered face showing a mix of excitement and nervousness. As Earth's top expert on alien species, Peter had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. "Amazing, isn't it? All those species living together in peace. We could learn a lot from them." Jake nodded but said nothing. He had read the briefings. The Council species had all evolved past their warlike phases thousands of years ago. Some had been prey animals on their homeworlds. Others were peaceful herbivores. A few had been predators, but they had long since abandoned violence as a way of solving problems. Humanity was different. Humans had only stopped fighting major wars among themselves 50 years ago, and even that peace felt fragile sometimes. The Odyssey docked smoothly, and soon Jake found himself walking through the station's wide corridors alongside Ambassador Karen Martinez. She was a distinguished woman in her 60s, gray-haired and confident, chosen to represent Earth because of her decades of experience in international diplomacy. If anyone could navigate the complex politics of the Galactic Council, it was her. "Remember," Karen said quietly as they walked, "we're the newcomers here. We observe, we listen, and we're respectful, no matter what happens." The council chamber was enormous, a circular room with seating arranged in rising tiers like an ancient amphitheater. Representatives from dozens of species filled the seats, their forms ranging from the familiar to the bizarre. There were insect-like beings with multiple arms, crystalline creatures that seemed to glow with inner light, and floating jellyfish things that drifted in tanks of liquid. All of them turned to look as the humans entered. Jake felt like a specimen under a microscope. A being with 4 arms and skin like polished bronze stood at the center of the chamber. "I am High Speaker Vorshen," the being said, its voice melodious and calm. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome humanity to this assembly. We have observed your species with great interest. You have achieved faster-than-light travel and established colonies beyond your home system. These are significant accomplishments." "Thank you, High Speaker," Karen replied with a respectful bow. "Earth is honored to be here. We hope to learn from the Council and contribute to the peace and prosperity of the galaxy." A hissing sound came from one section of the chamber. Jake turned to see a reptilian creature rising from its seat. The being was nearly 7 feet tall, covered in dark green scales with eyes like polished amber. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth. "The Vex Thari recognize these newcomers," the creature said, its voice dripping with contempt. "We have surveyed the regions of space you claim as your own. 3 of your colony worlds sit on planets that were ours in ancient times. By Vex Thari law, these worlds belong to us. You will evacuate them immediately." The chamber fell silent. Jake felt his jaw tighten. The 3 colonies the Vex Thari were talking about were home to nearly 2 million human civilians, families, children, people, who had built lives on those worlds. Karen's voice remained calm and diplomatic. "Ambassador Krethenal, we were not aware of any Vex Thari territorial claims in those regions. Our surveys showed no active settlements or markers of ownership. Perhaps we could discuss this matter and find a solution that satisfies both our peoples." Krethenal's laugh was like gravel scraping on metal. "There is nothing to discuss. Those worlds are ours. Your presence there is theft. You have one of your Earth weeks to remove your people, or we will remove them for you." Jake saw Ambassador Martinez's hands clench briefly before she forced herself to relax. "Ambassador Krethenal, I must respectfully inform you that Earth cannot and will not abandon its citizens. If there is a legitimate dispute about territory, We should resolve it through proper diplomatic channels. You dare refuse? Crethanel moved closer, looming over the human delegation. You are newcomers, barely capable of crossing the stars, and you think you can defy the Vexthari? We have ruled our sector for 5,000 years. What are you compared to that? We are human, Jake heard himself say, his voice steady. And we protect our own. Crethanel studied Jake with those amber eyes, and something like amusement flickered across the alien's face. You speak bravely for such a small and weak species. Very well. We will demonstrate what happens to those who refuse Vexthari authority. Our fleet will arrive at your colony of New Terra in 3 of your days. When your people see our ships, they will understand their mistake. The Vexthari ambassador turned and left the chamber, followed by several other reptilian beings. The remaining council members sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, High Speaker Vorshan spoke. I apologize for this disruption. The Vexthari are proud. They sometimes forget that the council prefers peaceful resolutions. However, their territorial claims may have legal merit under ancient treaties. The council will review the matter. How long will that review take? Karen asked. Several months, perhaps longer. These matters must be considered carefully. We don't have months, Jake said. They said 3 days. The Vexthari are posturing, said a crystalline being from the upper tiers. They expect you to withdraw rather than face military action. It is what any reasonable species would do. Peter Grant leaned forward. High Speaker, forgive me, but I've studied the Council's history. When was the last time any member species engaged in actual warfare? Vorshan paused as if accessing old memories. The last significant military conflict was approximately 1,700 years ago. It was resolved quickly when both sides realized the futility of violence. Since then, all disputes have been settled through arbitration and economic negotiation. What happened to species who didn't back down? Jake asked. There are no such species in the Council, Vorshan replied simply. Those who could not embrace peace either destroyed themselves or were integrated into more peaceful societies. The meeting ended shortly after, and the human delegation returned to the Odyssey in grim silence. Once they were secure in the ship's conference room, Karen slumped in her chair. They think we'll just leave, she said. They can't imagine we'd actually fight. Can we fight? Peter asked. The Vexthari have been spacefaring for thousands of years. Their technology must be far beyond ours. Amy Chen pulled up tactical displays on the room's screens. I've been analyzing their ship designs from the station's public databases. Their vessels are large and impressive, but they're built for show and transport, not combat. I don't think they've fought a real war in living memory. Neither have we, Jake pointed out. Not in space anyway. No, Amy agreed. But we've fought plenty of wars on Earth. We know how to hurt each other. These council species, they've forgotten what violence actually means. Karen stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the stars. I need to contact Earth. The President and the Joint Chiefs need to know what's happening. But I already know what they'll say. We don't abandon our people. Not ever. Even if it means war? Peter asked quietly. Especially then, Karen replied. That's what makes us human, Peter. We fight for each other. It's what we've always done. Jake thought about the council species living in their peaceful civilization for 2,000 years. They had forgotten what it meant to be truly afraid. They had forgotten that some species, some people, would rather die than surrender what they loved. The Vexthari were about to remember. Over the next 3 days, Jake watched as the human response took shape. Ships began moving from Earth and the outer colonies toward New Terra. Not just military vessels, but everything that could carry weapons or serve as support. The Odyssey received constant updates. Earth's defense forces were mobilizing. Civilians on New Terra were being evacuated, but thousands refused to leave, choosing instead to help fortify the colony. On Zenith Station, Council observers began moving monitoring ships into position around New Terra. They wanted to document what they assumed would be humanity's surrender. Several alien diplomats approached Karen with offers to mediate, all of them assuming that humans would see reason once they saw the size of the Vexthari fleet. They don't understand, Amy said as she reviewed the tactical reports. They think we'll back down because we're outnumbered. But humans don't work that way. What do we work like? Jake asked. Amy smiled grimly. We work like cornered. Captain Ryan Foster watched the Vexthari fleet approach on his tactical display and felt a strange calm settle over him. The Valkyrie was his ship, a sleek warship built in the orbital yards above Earth designed specifically for combat. She was smaller than most of the Vexthari vessels approaching, but Ryan knew something the aliens didn't. Size wasn't everything in a fight. "All weapon systems are online," reported Nicole Ross from the weapon station. She was young, barely 25, but her hands were steady on her controls. Railguns charged and ready. "Missile tubes loaded." "Good," Ryan said. "Remember the plan. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we don't give them time to think." Down on New Terra's surface, Lieutenant Ben Hayes stood on the roof of the colony's main administrative building, watching the sky through binoculars. He couldn't see the ships yet, they were still too far away, but he knew they were coming. Around him, his Marines had set up defensive positions, heavy weapons pointed toward the sky. It probably wouldn't matter. If the Vexithari wanted to bombard the colony from orbit, there was little the ground forces could do, but Ben wasn't planning to make it easy for them. "Sir," said one of his Marines, a woman named Kelly Price, "the last evacuation shuttle is leaving in 10 minutes. We could still get on it." Ben shook his head. "Marines don't abandon their post. Besides, someone needs to stay and protect the people who refuse to leave." "There's still 3,000 civilians down here," Kelly said. "They're either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both," Ben replied with a slight smile. "But there are people. That's all that matters." Aboard Thelmara's monitoring vessel, the Crystalline being watched the tactical situation with growing confusion. The Council had sent Thelmara to document what they assumed would be a brief confrontation, followed by a human surrender. Thelmara had documented hundreds of disputes over the centuries, and they all followed the same pattern. The weaker side would make a show of resistance, the stronger side would demonstrate their superiority, and then both parties would retreat to negotiate. But the humans weren't following the pattern. "This is illogical," Thelmara said to their assistant, a small floating drone that recorded everything. "The human ships are outnumbered nearly 7-1. They should be requesting mediation or withdrawing to a safer distance. Instead, they're scattering." The assistant drone beeped. "Perhaps their formation is based on tactics we are unfamiliar with?" "Perhaps," Thelmara said, unconvinced. "But it looks chaotic, unorganized." What Thelmara didn't understand was that chaos was the point. Human military doctrine had evolved through thousands of years of warfare, refined through countless battles where the only rule was survival. The humans knew that predictability was death. If your enemy could anticipate your moves, you were already defeated. On Zenith Station, Commander Jake Morrison watched multiple video feeds from the monitoring vessels. Ambassador Karen Martinez stood beside him, her face tight with worry. Dr. Peter Grant was frantically taking notes, trying to document everything for the historical record. "The Vexthari are firing," Amy Chen announced, pointing to one of the screens. The massive alien warships had opened fire with energy weapons, bright beams of focused plasma lancing through space toward where the human ships had been moments before. But the human vessels had already moved, their smaller size and more advanced engines allowing them to dodge with surprising agility. "The Valkyrie is returning fire," Amy continued. On screen, they watched as Captain Foster's ship unleashed its main weapon, a railgun that accelerated a dense tungsten projectile to 5% of the speed of light. The round crossed the distance between ships in a fraction of a second, too fast for the Vexithari sensors to track. The projectile hit the lead Vexithari cruiser dead center, punching through its shields like they didn't exist. The kinetic energy was so tremendous that the round didn't just penetrate the first ship. It went straight through and hit the vessel behind it. Then the third ship in line. 3 Vexthari warships crumpled and died in the space of 2 seconds. "By the ancestors," Peter breathed, watching the destruction. "Did they just—" "Kinetic weapons," Amy explained, her voice clinical. "Accelerate something heavy to relativistic speeds and you don't need explosives. The impact energy alone is devastating." On Thelmara's monitoring vessel, alarms were sounding, the Crystalline being stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "They destroyed 3 ships with 1 weapon? That's barbaric. Those projectiles could have missed and struck a planet. They could have caused unimaginable destruction." "They did not miss," the assistant drone observed. Back on the Valkyrie, Ryan Foster was already calling out his next orders. "Target the carriers. I want those fighter bays offline before they can launch." Nicole Ross worked her console with practiced efficiency, firing missiles full spread, A swarm of missiles erupted from the Valkyrie's launch tubes, each one accelerating hard toward the Vexithari carrier group. The aliens' point defense systems came online, shooting down many of the incoming missiles, but not all of them. The ones that got through struck with precision, targeting the massive hangar doors where the Vexithari fighters were supposed to launch. Explosions blossomed across the sides of two carriers as their hangar bays were breached. Atmosphere vented into space along with dozens of fighters that would never get to participate in the battle. "They're adapting," Nicole warned. "The Vexithari are tightening their formation." "Then we split them apart," Ryan said. "All ships, Wolfpack Pattern 7. Let's show them how humans hunt." The 6 human warships suddenly moved in coordinated pairs, each pair targeting a different section of the Vexithari fleet. It was a tactic as old as humanity itself, used by ancient hunters pursuing prey across the plains of prehistoric Earth. Separate your enemy, isolate them, and then destroy them piece by piece. The Vexithari fleet commander, Crethanel, watched from the bridge of his flagship and felt something he hadn't experienced in his entire military career. Uncertainty. The humans weren't fighting like any opponent he had studied. They weren't trying to disable ships or force a surrender. They were trying to kill. "All ships, return fire," Crethanel ordered. "Focus your weapons on individual targets. Destroy them one at a time." But the human ships wouldn't stay still long enough to target effectively. They danced through space like leaves in a hurricane, constantly moving, constantly firing. Their weapons were different too. Not the elegant energy beams that the Council species used, but crude, brutal things. Projectiles that hit like hammers. Missiles that came in swarms. Even their ships' maneuvers were aggressive, using their engines at power levels that should have been dangerous to their crews. On New Terra's surface, Ben Hayes received word that the battle was intensifying. "The Valkyrie has taken heavy damage," his communications officer reported. "They're venting atmosphere from multiple sections." Ben grabbed his communicator. "Valkyrie, this is ground command." "What's your status?" Captain Foster's voice came through, strained but determined. "We're hit bad, ground command. Lost main power to engines. But we're not done yet." "Sir, you need to evacuate," Ben urged. "Get your crew out of there." "Working on it," Ryan replied. "But first we're going to make this count." On the Valkyrie's bridge, Ryan looked at his remaining crew. Most had already evacuated in the escape pods. Only a handful stayed behind. Volunteers who understood what he was planning. "Nicole, how long until we lose life support?" Ryan asked. 10 minutes, maybe less," she replied. "Then we better make this quick. Helm, plot a ramming course. Target that Vexithari cruiser at heading 270. The helmsman, a young man named Carlos Webb, didn't hesitate. "Ramming course plotted, sir." "Execute," Ryan ordered. "And everyone to the escape pods, now, that's an order." Nicole looked at her captain. "Sir, you're coming too, right?" Ryan smiled. "Wouldn't miss it." But ladies first, they ran. The skeleton crew sprinted through the damaged corridors of the dying ship, making for the last functional escape pods. Behind them, the Valkyrie began accelerating toward the Vexithari cruiser. Her damaged engines pushed past their safety limits. On the Vexithari cruiser, the sensors officer suddenly shouted a warning. "The human ship is on a collision course." "They're not stopping!" The cruiser's captain watched in horror as the human warship accelerated directly toward them. Evasive maneuvers. "Fire all weapons!" But it was too late. The Valkyrie's mass combined with her velocity made her an unstoppable projectile. Just before impact, the escape pods blew free from her hull, tumbling away from the collision point. The Valkyrie struck the Vexithari cruiser at full speed. The impact was catastrophic, the human ship's reactor breaching at the moment of collision. The explosion consumed both vessels and 2 more. Vexithari ships that were too close to the blast. Thelmara watched the explosion bloom across their tactical display and felt something they had never experienced before. Terror. "They sacrificed their own ship," the crystalline being said, their voice shaking. "They turned it into a weapon. What kind of species does this?" The other human ships didn't pause to mourn their fallen comrades. If anything, they seemed to fight harder, with even more desperate fury. Human fighter pilots flying small craft that looked pitifully fragile. The council chamber on Zenith Station had never been so quiet. Representatives from 37 species sat in their designated areas, watching the recorded footage of the Battle of New Terra for the 3rd time. None of them spoke. Many looked physically ill, as much as their alien biologies allowed for such expressions. High Speaker Vor Shen stood at the center of the chamber, their 4 arms hanging limp at their sides. The bronze-skinned leader of the council seemed to have aged years in the past few hours. We have now seen the complete documentation provided by Observer Thelmara, Vor Shen said quietly. Are there any who dispute the accuracy of this recording? Silence answered. Then we must address what this means, Vor Shen continued. The human species has demonstrated combat capabilities far beyond what we anticipated. More concerning is their willingness to employ these capabilities without hesitation. The question before the Council is simple. What do we do about humanity? Ambassador Karen Martinez stood in the designated area for petitioners, flanked by Commander Jake Morrison and Dr. Peter Grant. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying over the casualties at New Terra, but her back was straight and her voice was steady. May I speak, High Speaker? Karen asked. The humans will be given an opportunity to address the Council, Vor Shen replied. But first we will hear from our own members. Councillor Thelmara, you observed the battle directly. Please share your analysis. The crystalline being floated forward, their facets catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. What I witnessed was beyond my experience or training, Thelmara began. I have documented conflicts for 200 years. I have seen disputes over trade routes, territorial disagreements, and resource allocation arguments. I have never seen what I saw at New Terra. Thelmara's form seemed to dim slightly. The humans did not fight to make a point or establish negotiating position. They fought to destroy their enemy completely. When their weapons ran out, they used their ships as weapons. When their ships were destroyed, individual humans used their own bodies as weapons. One pilot, a female named Sandra Price, deliberately crashed her vessel into the enemy command ship, killing herself to eliminate their leadership. A ripple of disturbed sounds moved through the council members. Several species had no concept of suicide, and the idea of deliberately ending one's own life for a tactical advantage was incomprehensible to them. The battle lasted 6 hours, Thelmara continued. The humans were outnumbered nearly 7-1. By all logical analysis, they should have been destroyed in the first 30 minutes. Instead, they inflicted such devastating casualties that the Vexthari fled. Of 40 ships, only 12 escaped. The humans sacrificed all of their warships, but they won. A council member from the insectoid Clith species raised multiple limbs. Observer Thelmara, you said the humans used kinetic weapons. Projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds. Do they not understand how dangerous such weapons are? If they had missed, those projectiles could have continued through space indefinitely, potentially striking inhabited worlds. They did not miss, Thelmara replied simply. Not once. Every shot they fired hit exactly what they aimed at. Another council member, this one resembling a large plant with mobile vines, asked, what about their casualties? How did they respond to the loss of their vessels and crew? The surviving humans transmitted a simple message after the battle, Thelmara said. They stated that the sacrifice was acceptable because the colony was saved. They did not request assistance. They did not ask for sympathy. They simply reported mission success and began recovery operations. Dr. Peter Grant had been listening quietly, but now he stepped forward. May I address that question more fully, High Speaker? Vor Shen gestured permission. Thank you, Peter said. I believe there is a fundamental misunderstanding here about human psychology. We are not indifferent to death. Those pilots who died, those crew members who sacrificed themselves, they had families. They had friends, dreams, lives they wanted to live. But humans have something that I think many council species have lost over your centuries of peace. We have the capacity for controlled violence. Controlled? A council member interjected. What we saw looked like barbarism. It looked like warfare, Peter corrected gently. Which is different. Barbarism is violence without purpose or restraint. What you saw at New Terra was violence applied with precision and intention. Those humans died to protect others. That's not barbarism. That's sacrifice, Jake Morrison spoke up. If I may add something, High Speaker. I've been reviewing the Council's military history. The last significant armed conflict was 1,700 years ago. Since then, you've had peace. That's admirable. That's something humanity aspires to achieve. But it's also made you vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? Vor Shen asked. To species like the Vexthari, Jake replied. They threatened human civilians and expected us to fold because we're newcomers. They were counting on us not knowing how to fight back. But humans have never stopped fighting. We fought each other for thousands of years. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. We learned every dirty trick, every brutal tactic, every way to hurt and kill that evolution and desperation could teach us. He paused, looking around the chamber. We don't want to use that knowledge. We'd much rather live in peace like you do. But when someone threatens our people, we remember everything we tried so hard to forget. A long silence followed. Finally, a council member from the Karathi species, beings that looked like bipedal lions with silver fur, stood up. I will speak plainly. The humans terrify me. What I saw in that recording was not the behavior of a civilized species. It was the behavior of predators. Efficient, ruthless predators who kill without hesitation. Karen took a step forward. You're right to be afraid. We should all be afraid of what humans can do. I'm afraid of it. I'm afraid of what we might become if we let that capacity for violence control us. But here's the thing you need to understand. We're not your enemy. We don't want to hurt you. We want to join you, learn from you, and contribute to the peace you've built. But what happens when you decide we are your enemy? The Karathi asked.
What happens when humanity turns those weapons, those tactics, on the Council?
Then you'll lose, Jake said bluntly. I won't lie about that. If humanity decided to wage war on the Council, it would be devastating. Not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we're willing to pay prices you're not. We'll sacrifice everything if we have to. The chamber erupted in panicked conversations. Council members turned to each other, speaking in dozens of different languages about the threat humanity posed. Ambassador Martinez raised her voice. But we don't have to be enemies. That's the whole point. Yes, humans are dangerous. Yes, we know how to fight and kill with terrifying efficiency, but we're also capable of great compassion, creativity, and cooperation. We're trying to be better than our history. We're trying to evolve past our violent nature just like you did. The difference, Dr. Peter Grant added, is that we haven't forgotten how to fight. We've just chosen not to. That's not the same thing as being unable to fight. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy needs a species that remembers what violence is. Why would we need that? Vorshen asked, genuinely confused. Because peace only lasts when everyone respects it, Karen replied. The Vexthari didn't respect your peace. They threatened human civilians because they thought they could get away with it. They were bullies, and bullies don't respond to diplomacy alone. They respond to strength. Jake stepped forward. High Speaker, how many times has the Council been threatened by aggressive species? How many times have you had to negotiate away territory or resources because you couldn't defend them? How many times have you compromised your principles because the alternative was conflict, and you've forgotten how to fight? Vorshen didn't answer, but their silence was telling. Humanity offers you something, Jake continued. We can be your weapon, your deterrent. Not because we want war, but because sometimes the only way to maintain peace is to make war too costly for aggressors to consider. A new voice spoke from the upper tiers, old and raspy. It belonged to one of the eldest council members, a being called Vorthek who rarely participated in debates. I remember, the ancient creature said. I remember when my species still fought wars. I remember what it felt like to fear death, to fight for survival. We thought we had evolved past such primitive urges. Perhaps we simply grew comfortable. Vorthek descended from the upper tiers, moving slowly. The humans are right about one thing. The Vexthari threatened them because the Vexthari knew the Council would not intervene. We would debate, discuss, form committees. Meanwhile, humans would die. The Vexthari gambled that humanity would behave like Council species, that they would choose surrender over violence. The ancient being stopped in front of Karen. They gambled wrong, and now the galaxy knows that humanity is different. The question is, what do we do with that knowledge? Karen met the ancient being's gaze. Give us a chance. Let us prove we can be both strong and peaceful. Let us show you that violence and civilization aren't opposites, they're just different tools. We'll use the right tool for the situation. 3 months had passed since the Battle of New Terra. 3 months since humanity had proven they could fight and win against overwhelming odds. 3 months since the galaxy had learned to fear the newcomers from Earth. On Zenith Station, Ambassador Karen Martinez walked through corridors that felt different now. Alien beings who passed her would step aside, giving her more space than necessary. Some nodded respectfully. Others simply stared. None of them looked at her the way they had before the battle, with friendly curiosity. Now they looked at her with something else. They looked at her with fear. Karen entered her office to find Commander Jake Morrison and Dr. Peter Grant waiting for her, both looking serious. We have a problem, Jake said without preamble. Only one? Karen asked tiredly, sitting down at her desk. That would be a nice change. The Vexthari are assembling a fleet, Jake explained, pulling up a holographic display. Intelligence reports suggest they're gathering every warship they can muster. We're talking about 200 vessels, maybe more. Karen felt her stomach drop. They're coming for revenge. For Earth, Peter added quietly. They're not going after our colonies this time. They want to hit the homeworld, hurt us where it matters most. Karen studied the intelligence reports, her mind racing. 200 ships. Earth's home fleet had only 30 warships, and most of those were smaller vessels designed for system patrol, not full-scale warfare. What does the Council say? They're debating, Jake replied with barely concealed anger. Some members think we provoked this by defeating the Vexthari at New Terra. Others believe this is an internal matter between humanity and the Vexthari. They're talking about non-intervention. Non-intervention, Karen repeated bitterly. We join their council, agree to all their terms, and when we're threatened, they debate. Wonderful. Peter looked uncomfortable. To be fair, the council has never dealt with this kind of situation before. In their history, species don't seek revenge after losing a battle. They negotiate, compromise, move on. The Vexthari obsession with honor and retaliation is foreign to them. Well, they better learn fast, Karen said, because those 200 ships are going to reach Earth in 3 weeks. Back on Earth? In the military command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. General Lisa Brooks studied the same intelligence reports. She was a severe woman in her late 50s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. Before humanity reached the stars, Lisa had commanded troops in the last major conflicts on Earth, the border wars in the Pacific that had finally convinced the world's nations to unite under a single government. She understood war. More importantly, she understood what humans were willing to do when their survival was at stake. Show me our defensive capabilities, she ordered. An aide brought up tactical displays showing Earth's orbital defenses, the home fleet positioning, and ground-based weapon systems. It wasn't enough. Not even close. What about Protocol Omega? Lisa asked quietly. The room went silent. Every officer present knew what Protocol Omega was, though few had ever expected it to be activated. It was the plan they had developed in secret, the plan they hoped they would never need. General, one of her colonels said carefully, Protocol Omega was designed as a last resort. If we activate it, there's no going back. The political consequences alone. The political consequences don't matter if we're all dead, Lisa interrupted. If the Vexthari want to destroy Earth, we'll show them what humans do when cornered. Activate Protocol Omega, and get me Admiral Cole. Admiral Henry Cole commanded Earth's home fleet from the bridge of the battleship Constitution, Earth's largest warship. He was younger than Lisa, barely 40, but he had proven himself in the early skirmishes with pirate groups and rogue asteroids. He had never fought a real war. That was about to change. Admiral Cole, General Brooks said when the communication link connected, you're going to receive some unusual orders in the next few hours. I need you to trust me and execute them without question. Henry's jaw tightened. What kind of orders, General? The kind that will make the galaxy think we're insane, Lisa replied. But they're also the kind that might save Earth. Across Earth and the colonies, civilians watched the news with growing anxiety. Everyone knew the Vexthari fleet was coming. The government had been honest about that much. What they hadn't told the civilians was how desperate the situation really was. On Zenith Station, Observer Thelmara had positioned their monitoring vessel to follow the Vexthari fleet. The crystalline being had volunteered for this assignment, partly out of duty and partly out of morbid curiosity. What would humanity do when faced with such overwhelming force? The Vexthari fleet was impressive, Thelmara had to admit. 200 warships moving in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. At the center of the fleet was the massive dreadnought Vengeance, commanded by war leader Tharkesh, the highest-ranking military officer in the Vexthari Empire. Tharkesh stood on his bridge, staring at the tactical display showing the route to Earth. How long until we reach the human homeworld? He demanded. 17 days at current speed, war leader, an officer replied. Excellent, Tharkesh said, baring his teeth in what might have been a smile. The humans humiliated us at New Terra. They made us look weak. Now we will show the entire galaxy what happens to those who dare strike at the Vexthari. War leader, another officer said hesitantly, the Council has sent multiple messages requesting we halt our advance and enter negotiations. Ignore them, Tharkesh ordered. The Council is weak. They have been weak for centuries. After we burn the human homeworld, perhaps other species will remember that strength, not words, determines who rules the galaxy. Thelmara heard this transmission and felt a chill run through their crystalline structure. They immediately sent a priority message back to Zenith Station and to the human delegation. When Karen received the message, she immediately contacted Earth. They're not just coming to fight, she told General Brooks over the secure channel. They're coming to destroy. Tharkesh is talking about burning Earth as an example. Let them come, Lisa replied calmly. We're ready. Lisa, Karen said, using the general's first name, which she rarely did. I know that tone. What are you planning? Something that will either save us or doom us, Lisa replied. But either way, the Vexithari will remember this. The entire galaxy will. As the Vexthari fleet approached Earth's solar system, Admiral Cole received his final orders from General Brooks. He read them twice, then called his senior officers to the briefing room. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level, Henry began. Protocol Omega has been activated. You all know what that means. His officers exchanged glances. Commander Amy Chen, who had survived the Battle of New Terra and been promoted to serve under Cole, spoke up. Sir, Protocol Omega requires civilian participation. Are we really going to ask merchants and cargo haulers to fight a military battle? We're not going to ask, Henry replied. We're going to tell them the situation and give them a choice. Any ship that wants to evacuate to the outer colonies, they're free to go. Any ship that wants to stay and help defend Earth, we'll welcome them. They're not soldiers, another officer protested. No, Henry agreed, but they're humans. And humans fight for their home. The call went out across Earth's orbital space, through the colonies on Mars and the mining stations in the asteroid belt, to every human ship within range of Earth. The message was simple. Earth was under threat. The military needed help. Anyone who could help was welcome to stay. Anyone who couldn't was free to leave. The response shocked even Henry Cole. Within hours, thousands of ships began converging on Earth. Cargo haulers designed to carry goods between planets. Mining ships equipped with powerful lasers for cutting asteroids. Corporate yachts owned by wealthy executives. Even cruise ships that carried tourists to see Saturn's rings. They came from everywhere, their crews volunteering to defend the homeworld. Among them was Captain Tony Clark, a grizzled cargo hauler in his 60s who had spent 40 years moving freight between Earth and Mars. His ship, the Liberty, was old and slow, barely capable of faster-than-light travel. But she had powerful engines and cargo holds that could be retrofitted with weapons. When his crew questioned the decision to stay and fight, Tony had been blunt. My grandfather died at New Terra, he said. He was on the Valkyrie when Captain Foster rammed that Vexthari cruiser. The old man didn't run, and neither will I. Any of you want to leave, the shuttles are that way. No shame in it. But I'm staying. His entire crew stayed. On Zenith Station, the Council held another emergency session. The vote was quick and devastating. The Council would not intervene in the conflict between humanity and the Vexthari. It was deemed an internal dispute that both parties needed to resolve. Ambassador Karen Martinez stood before the Council and said the words she had been dreading. Then humanity withdraws its petition for Council membership. We will not be part of an organization that abandons us when we need help. Ambassador, High Speaker Vorshen said sadly, please understand our position. If we intervene every time a species faces military action, we would constantly be at war. The Council has maintained peace by staying neutral in conflicts. The Vexthari fleet approached Earth like a wave of death, 200 warships moving with the confidence of predators who had never truly been challenged. War leader Tharkesh watched from his command throne as Earth grew larger on the view screen, a blue and green jewel hanging in space. Begin long-range scans, Tharkesh ordered. I want to know every defensive position, every weapon platform, every ship they have. His sensor officer worked the controls, then paused, looking confused. War leader, I'm detecting thousands of ships in orbit around Earth, but most of them appear to be civilian vessels, cargo ships, transports, even luxury craft. Tharkesh laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. The humans are so desperate they're sending merchants to fight us. This will be easier than I thought. All ships maintain formation. We'll sweep through their pathetic defense and be bombarding their planet within the hour. Aboard the Constitution, Admiral Henry Cole watched the Vexthari fleet approach and felt his heart pounding. This was it. Everything humanity had built, everything they had become, would be decided in the next few hours. All civilian vessels, this is Admiral Cole, he transmitted. You know your assignments. Stay in your designated sectors and follow the battle plan. And remember, you're not alone out there. We're all in this together. Captain Tony Clark aboard the cargo hauler Liberty checked his improvised weapon systems one last time. His crew had spent the last 3 days welding missile launchers to the cargo bay doors and rigging explosive charges in the holds. The Liberty wasn't much of a warship, but she could still hurt someone. Crew, this is the captain, Tony announced over the ship's intercom. I know you're scared. Hell, I'm scared too. But we've got a job to do. Our grandchildren are down on that planet. Our families. Our future. So we're going to do what humans have always done when backed into a corner. We're going to fight. His crew responded with a chorus of acknowledgments, their voices steady despite the fear they must all be feeling. The Vexthari fleet crossed the orbital boundary of Mars, entering the inner solar system. They expected Earth's defenders to meet them there, to try to stop them before they got too close to the homeworld. Instead, the human ships fell back, retreating toward Earth. They're running, Tharkesh said with satisfaction. Maintain pursuit. Don't let them regroup. What Tharkesh didn't know was that the retreat was planned. Every meter of space the humans gave up brought the Vexthari fleet closer to the trap General Lisa Brooks had prepared. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Lisa watched multiple tactical displays showing the movement of both fleets. Around her, dozens of officers monitored systems and relayed information. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Range to orbital defense grid? Lisa asked. Vexthari fleet will enter optimal range in 15 minutes, an officer reported. Good, Lisa said. Prepare to activate the grid on my command, and someone get me a direct line to Admiral Cole. When Henry's face appeared on her screen, Lisa could see the strain he was under. Admiral, we're almost ready. When I give the word, I need your fleet and all civilian vessels to scatter on pre-planned vectors. The Vexthari won't know what we're doing until it's too late. Understood, General, Henry replied. But are you sure about this? The orbital defense grid was supposed to be a deterrent, not an actual weapon. The Vexthari made it an actual weapon when they decided to attack Earth, Lisa replied coldly. Execute the plan, Admiral, and may God have mercy on their souls because we won't. Observer Thelmara watched from their monitoring vessel, positioned at a safe distance from the coming battle. The crystalline being had reported everything they saw back to the Council, but the Council's only response had been to order Thelmara to continue observing. No help was coming. Humanity would face this threat alone. The human fleet is scattering, Thelmara noted to their recording drone. They appear to be breaking formation. This makes no tactical sense. They're making themselves easier targets. But even as Thelmara spoke, they noticed something strange. The human ships weren't scattering randomly. They were moving to very specific positions, creating gaps in their defensive line, gaps that the Vexthari fleet was eagerly rushing through. All ships advance, Tharkesh ordered. Their formation is collapsing. We'll punch through their center and be at Earth within minutes. The Vexthari fleet surged forward, eager to capitalize on what they thought was human panic. They poured through the gaps in the human defensive line, spreading out to envelope the retreating human ships. That was when General Lisa Brooks gave the order. Activate the grid. Around Earth, hidden among the civilian satellites and commercial stations, thousands of weapons platforms came online. They had been built in secret over the past 3 months, disguised as communications equipment, weather monitoring stations, and orbital factories. Each platform was equipped with targeting systems far more advanced than anything the Vexthari possessed, and each platform was armed with antimatter missiles. The Council had banned antimatter weapons 2,000 years ago, declaring them too dangerous and destructive for civilized warfare. Humanity had signed that treaty when they joined the Council, but humanity was no longer part of the Council. The orbital defense grid fired. 3,000 antimatter missiles launched simultaneously, each one tracking a different Vexthari vessel. The missiles were small, barely larger than a person, but each one contained enough antimatter to annihilate everything within a kilometer radius. Tharkesh saw the launch indicators light up his tactical display like a constellation of deadly stars. For the first time since entering the solar system, he felt genuine fear. Evasive maneuvers. All ships scatter. Point defense systems, shoot down those missiles. The Vexthari fleet tried to respond, but they were too deep in the grid's coverage area, surrounded on all sides by launch platforms. Their point defense systems managed to destroy many of the incoming missiles, but not all of them. Not even close to all of them. The first missile struck a Vexthari cruiser amidships. Matter met antimatter, and the resulting explosion released more energy than a small star. The cruiser simply ceased to exist, along with 2 nearby ships that were consumed by the blast. Then the rest of the missiles hit. Space around Earth lit up with dozens of antimatter explosions, each one a miniature sun that burned for a fraction of a second before fading. Vexthari ships disappeared in those explosions, reduced to their component atoms in microseconds. All ships retreat, Tharkesh screamed into his communicator. Get out of range, now! But Admiral Cole wasn't going to let them escape that easily. All human vessels attack pattern Delta. Cut off their retreat. No survivors. The human warships, which had scattered to get clear of the orbital defense grid's firing solution, now converged on the panicking Vexithari fleet. The civilian vessels, armed with improvised weapons and sheer determination, joined the attack. Captain Tony Clark pushed the Liberty's engines to maximum as he angled toward a damaged Vexthari destroyer. Load all explosives into the forward cargo bay, he ordered his crew, and someone find me the most volatile fuel we have. Captain, his first officer said, understanding what Tony was planning. If we do that, we won't survive the detonation. I know, Tony replied. Get everyone to the escape pods. You've got 2 minutes. Captain, you need to evacuate too, the first officer protested. Tony smiled sadly. Somebody needs to keep her on course. Besides, my grandfather went down with the Valkyrie at New Terra. It's a family tradition. Now go, that's an order. His crew reluctantly abandoned the bridge, running for the escape pods. Tony stayed at the helm, guiding the Liberty toward her target. He thought about his grandchildren, safe in a school in Colorado. He thought about his late wife, who would probably be furious with him for doing something this stupid. But mostly, he thought about Earth, that blue marble hanging in space behind him, and how it was worth any price to protect it. The Vexithari destroyer saw the cargo ship approaching and tried to fire its weapons. But the ship was too damaged, its systems failing. Tony pushed the Liberty to full speed, ramming his ship directly into the destroyer's power core. The explosion consumed both vessels, along with 4 more Vexithari ships that had been trying to protect their damaged companion. Earth sends her regards, Tony had transmitted in his final seconds, his last words now being repeated across every human channel. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Civilian ships, crewed by ordinary people who had chosen to become warriors, rammed themselves into Vexithari vessels. Mining ships used their powerful cutting lasers to slice through alien hulls. Even luxury yachts, fragile things never meant for combat, made suicide runs against the enemy fleet. Thelmara watched in horror and fascination. They're doing it again, the crystalline being transmitted to the Council. The humans are sacrificing themselves, not just soldiers this time, but civilians. Merchants, miners, families, they're all throwing themselves at the enemy without hesitation. War leader Tharkesh, his flagship heavily damaged and surrounded by human ships, finally understood what he was facing. These weren't Council species, trained to value life above all else. These were humans who valued their home and their future more than their own lives. The Galactic Council chamber was packed like it had never been before. Every species had sent their representatives, and many had sent their leaders as well. The curved walls that usually echoed with polite debate now hummed with anxious conversation in dozens of languages. Observer Thelmara floated near the front of the chamber, their crystalline form still carrying recordings of everything they had witnessed at the Battle of Earth. The images haunted them, civilian ships deliberately crashing into military vessels, ordinary people choosing death over surrender, and the antimatter missiles, weapons that had been banned for 2,000 years, lighting up the darkness of space with destructive fury. High Speaker Vorshen called the session to order, their forearms raised for silence. We are gathered to discuss the human question, Vorshen announced. 3 months ago, humanity was granted provisional membership in this council. Then they withdrew that membership when we refused to intervene in their conflict with the Vexthari. Now, after witnessing the Battle of Earth, we must decide, what is humanity's place in the galaxy? A council member from the insectoid Clith species was the first to speak. The humans violated the antimatter weapons ban. This alone should result in sanctions, possibly even military intervention to force disarmament. Military intervention? Commander Jake Morrison spoke from the human delegation's position, his voice cutting through the chamber. You couldn't muster the courage to help us when we were being attacked, but now you want to attack us for defending ourselves? That's rich. You used forbidden weapons, the Clith representative insisted. We used the weapons we needed to survive, Ambassador Karen Martinez replied, standing beside Jake. The Vexthari came to our homeworld with 200 warships. They weren't interested in negotiation or compromise. They wanted to destroy Earth to make an example of us. What would you have had us do? Die politely so we didn't offend your sensibilities? Dr. Peter Grant stood as well. With respect to the Council, your weapons bans were created by species who had the luxury of peace. You banned antimatter weapons because you didn't need them anymore. But humanity was fighting for survival. In that situation, moral absolutes become luxuries we couldn't afford. A four-legged being from the Karathi species spoke up, their silver fur bristling with agitation. The issue is not just the weapons. It's what the humans represent. They are too dangerous, too violent. They don't think like us. They don't value the same things we do. You're right, Jake agreed. We don't think like you. When the Vexthari threatened our people, you formed committees and held debates. We prepared to fight. When they attacked, you watched from a safe distance. We bled and died to protect what was ours. We're different from you, and maybe that's a good thing. How is that good? The Karathi demanded. Your violence threatens the peace we've built. Does it? Karen challenged. Or does our willingness to fight protect that peace? Tell me, after what you saw at Earth, how many aggressive species are going to think twice before threatening council members? How many bullies are going to reconsider when they realize the council has allies who remember how to fight? An ancient being from the upper tiers spoke, their voice crackling with age. I am Vorthek, and I am old enough to remember when my species still waged war. I voted against helping humanity because I thought you would surrender, as any civilized species would. I was wrong. Vorthek descended slowly from their seat. What I witnessed at Earth was not barbarism. It was love. Humans didn't fight because they enjoyed violence. They fought because they loved their home, their families, their future. And they were willing to sacrifice everything to protect that love. When did we forget that love is worth fighting for? Thelmara floated forward. High Speaker, if I may speak? Vorshen nodded permission. I have observed humanity more closely than any other council member, Thelmara began. I was at New Terra when they first showed us what they were capable of. I was at Earth when they defended their homeworld against impossible odds. I have seen humans at their most violent, and I have also seen them at their most compassionate. The crystalline being's form seemed to pulse with inner light. After the Battle of Earth, I expected the humans to pursue the retreating Vexthari ships into their own territory. I expected revenge, a continuation of violence. Instead, they stopped at the edge of their system. They let the survivors go. When Vexthari escape pods were found drifting in space, human rescue ships picked them up and treated their injuries. Thelmara paused. The humans who fought so ferociously to defend their home showed mercy to defeated enemies. They demonstrated that they could turn their violence on and off like a switch. That level of control, that capacity for both fury and mercy, is not barbarism. It's discipline of the highest order. A long silence followed Thelmara's words. Finally, High Speaker Vorshen spoke. The Council must vote on several matters today. First, should humanity face sanctions for using banned weapons? The vote was swift. By a narrow margin, the Council voted no. The argument that won the day was simple. Humanity had withdrawn from the Council before using the weapons, so technically they weren't bound by Council law at the time. Second, Vorshen continued, should humanity be offered full membership in the Galactic Council? This vote took longer. Species huddled in their groups, debating in hushed tones. Finally, they were ready. The vote is unanimous, Vorshen announced, and there was clear surprise in their voice. Humanity is offered full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. Karen felt her heart racing. Hi speaker, may I consult with my government before responding? Of course, Forshen replied. But I should also inform you of a special provision that has been added to humanity's membership. It required unanimous approval, which it received. What provision? Jake asked suspiciously. No council species may engage in military action against humanity without unanimous council approval, Forshen explained. Essentially, the council has agreed that attacking humanity should be considered an attack on the council itself. Karen and Jake exchanged glances. Peter looked stunned. Why would you do that? Karen asked. A council member Karen didn't recognize spoke up. Because we're afraid of you, Ambassador. We admit it freely. We're terrified of what humanity could do if you decided we were your enemy, but we're also wise enough to realize that having you as an ally is far better than having you as an enemy. Another species added, and because what you said was true. The galaxy needs to remember that some things are worth fighting for. We've had peace for so long that we forgot how to maintain it. You've reminded us. Karen took a deep breath. High Speaker, I accept the Council's offer on behalf of humanity. We will be honored to join you. But I want to be clear about something. We're not your weapon. We're not your guard dog. We're partners who happen to know how to fight when necessary. That's exactly what we need, Forshen replied. Partners who complement our weaknesses with their strengths. Over the following months, the galaxy watched as humanity integrated into the Council. It wasn't always smooth. Human directness clashed with alien diplomacy. Human impatience conflicted with the Council's slow deliberation. But gradually, both sides learned to work together. Admiral Henry Cole was promoted to Joint Chief of Galactic Defense, a new position created specifically to modernize the Council's military capabilities. He worked with alien engineers to upgrade their ships and train their crews in tactics that had been forgotten for centuries. Commander Amy Chen became Captain of the Horizon, Earth's first contribution to the Council peacekeeping force. Her ship patrolled the border regions, showing the flag and reminding aggressive species that the Council now had teeth. Dr. Peter Grant established the Institute for Human-Alien Understanding, a research center dedicated to helping both humans and aliens learn to coexist. It became one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the galaxy. On Earth, memorials were built for the 50,000 who died defending the homeworld. Captain Tony Clark's name was engraved alongside the crew of the Liberty, remembered as heroes who gave everything to protect their home. The Vexthari Empire collapsed within a year, with their military shattered and their reputation destroyed. Other species that had been quietly oppressed by the Vexthari saw an opportunity. The once proud empire fractured into dozens of smaller states, none of them powerful enough to threaten anyone. Interestingly, several of these new Vexthari nations applied for council membership. They were accepted under human sponsorship. Karen Martinez personally welcomed them, saying, "We fought you because you threatened us, but we have no interest in revenge. Help us build peace and the past is forgotten." The gesture shocked the galaxy. Humans who had fought so fiercely were willing to forgive just as completely. It was a lesson the Council took to heart. 50 years later, the galaxy was at peace, not the fragile peace of species too afraid to fight, but genuine peace maintained by mutual respect and the knowledge that aggression had consequences. An elderly ambassador, Karen Martinez, stood on an observation deck on Zenith Station, looking out at the stars. She was in her hundreds now, kept alive by advanced alien medicine that extended human lifespans. She had